Alright everyone, this is our little mini lecture on the bronchial tree, and not just the bronchial tree, but essentially all of the airflow from external to internal. So what I'm showing you here are both combined pictures that you should have done some labeling on in the above work, okay, before you watch this video. So air, of course, starts, hopefully you know, through the nose. It's a nice easy one, so it flows in through the nose. And remember that big open space right behind the nose is called the nasal cavity. Alright, it's then going to flow down the back of the throat. But there was actually three parts to the throat, and if you remember, right, the first part of the throat was the nasopharynx. The second part was the oropharynx. And the last part, top to bottom, right, is the laryngopharynx. I think I spelled that right. I think I put one too many letters there. Alright, so again, top portion of the pharynx is the nasopharynx, the portion behind the mouth is the oropharynx, and the portion lower than the mouth, but before the trachea, is the laryngopharynx. Alright, then it has to pass this little epiglottis and pass the larynx or the voice box. And now we're finally going to head down into the lower respiratory tract, which of course starts with our good old windpipe, which we are going to of course call the trachea. Alright, as we shift this picture just a smidge, right, the trachea extends from, on this top picture, right, just underneath that larynx. So this portion here, but you can see it's a nice long tube with those C-shaped cartilage rings. And as it enters the chest cavity, it is going to split, and it's going to split once, into two divisions, right? One into the right lung and one into the left lung, and we call that very first split the primary bronchi, and the fact the word primary refers to one. Okay, once it's in the chest cavity and just split for each of the lungs, it's going to split a second time. All right, 3 times here on the right and 2 more times here on the left, and we call those the secondary bronchi. Alright, it's going to start splitting a third time, and the term for third is tertiary. So we call these the tertiary bronchi. It is then going to split thousands and thousands of times, and so we don't really keep going with this, primary, secondary, tertiary designation, but what we're going to do is that because they become so small, we're going to change up the suffix to refer to small. And just like we talked arterioles, right, the O-L-E-S is a small artery, and venules, U-L-E-S, right, small vein. We're going to refer to these smaller bronchi as bronchioles. Okay, bronchioles are going to end in these little portions that come out into this grape-like sac, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But those little portions that end in this grape-like sac are called the terminal bronchioles. And again, terminal just means the end. And then the airflow ends right in those grape-like sacs or those alveoli. Alright, so let's do a quick review, and then I'll sort of just go over a couple of functions. Alright, so again, we start through the nose. We go through the nasal cavity, right down the back of the throat, which is the pharynx, but the 3 parts are the nasopharynx first, the oropharynx second, the laryngopharynx third. It is then going to go past this epiglottis and the larynx, or the voice box, into the trachea, which goes down into the chest and the lower respiratory tract. Splits one time, that is the primary bronchi. A second time, that is the secondary bronchi. Third time it splits, we refer to it as the tertiary bronchi. Then it splits thousands of times, those are the bronchioles, and the ones that end in those little grape-like clusters are called terminal bronchioles. And those little grape-like sacs themselves are the alveoli. Now, remember that most of this is really just to get oxygen from the external world, or the outside, all the way down to those alveoli. Because if we can't get oxygen down there, we're never going to get oxygen into our bodies and into our bloodstream. But as it flows down, the only location where we actually exchange oxygen inside of this respiratory system is through these alveoli, right? So really the trachea, the bronchi at all the levels, the bronchioles, it is really just to get it down to the alveoli so that we can exchange oxygen down there. And remember the type of tissue that we find there was the simple squamous, and that referred to that one single layer, right? Very thin or plate-like cells, which makes it nice and easy for oxygen to get into and out of this alveoli, so there's not a lot of resistance. All right, so we just need to get it down there so that we can get it through the alveoli. And as you start to look at some disorders and diseases of the lungs, one of the biggest problems with COPD, right, and emphysema in particular, is that we start to damage these alveoli. And if we damage the alveoli, we can be getting, right, the oxygen down to this end point, but if we damage these, we can't actually get it into the bloodstream, which is a problem for our patients. Okay, hope this little discussion was helpful.